Hello everyone, it's Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and it's time for another Instant Deck Tech. So as you probably know by now, Monday means it's Modern Monday here in Instant Deck Tech land, and we have a super spicy list today. This is Esper Erayo, recently took a Magic Online user by the name of Nuno Pereira to a 5-0 finish in a competitive Modern League, so congrats to Nuno Pereira on their finish with the deck. A quick reminder before we break it all down, if you enjoy this deck and you want to see it made into videos, take a minute, click the like button, the subscribe button, leave a comment, anything you can do to support your deck, because whichever deck is most popular gets a shot at being made into videos next week. So Esper Erayo is built around Erayo Soratami Ascendant. So this is a card from a really weird cycle, kind of the original flip cards, except this is before Wizards decided it was okay to print double-sided cards, so instead of flipping to the back of the card, you kind of just flip it upside down. So on its front half, it's just a 1/1 flyer for 2, but it has an ability where whenever the 4th spell of a turn is played, you get to flip Erayo, and it turns into a legendary enchantment that counters the first spell that is cast each turn by an opponent. So it's essentially like a Jace emblem, except it is on an enchantment, and it comes in 2-mana form. So kind of the idea of this deck is to play Erayo on turn 2, and then hopefully on turn 3, and even occasionally on turn 2, play 4 spells, flip it around, and then you kind of have this soft lock on your opponent. It doesn't just outright win the game, but it is really hard for an opponent to win once their first spell each turn is being countered. And the deck gets to play all these spells, which kind of work with the other creatures and plans of the deck as well. So how does the deck go about casting 4 spells? Well, most obviously, it has a bunch of free spells. So Gitaxian Probe, Manamorphose, and Mishra's Bauble theoretically are all free. Manamorphose, you need 2 mana, but you get that mana back. And the important thing about these cards is they don't cost you a card. So you probe, you get the card back, get a slight bit of information about your opponent. It costs you a couple life, but doesn't cost you any mana. Manamorphose, kind of the same thing, except you don't get to look at your opponent's hand. And then Mishra's Bauble, the draw is delayed, but all of these are really easy ways to cast a spell for free. So you get Gitaxian Probe, Manamorphose, Mishra's Bauble, that's 4 spells. You flip around your Erayo, and all of a sudden your opponent's semi-locked out of the game. The deck also has some free removal spells in Slaughter Pact and Gut Shot. So again, just other ways to flip Erayo, and these are actually pretty powerful. They are sneaky because your opponent doesn't really expect removal when you're tapped out, so you can Slaughter Pact and Inkmoth Nexus. Gut Shot, awesome against Infect and Affinity, actually hits a lot of things, and it works with the plan of the deck of just having these free spells to flip Erayo around and hopefully turn it into an enchantment that's hard to deal with. And then there's some spells that aren't quite free, but almost free. Serum Visions cost 1 mana, Dismember, only a singleton, but also costs 1 mana if you're willing to pay the life, and they're just powerful effects. Dismember can get rid of bigger creatures like Tarmogoyf and so forth. Serum Visions keeps you cycling through your deck, and then the deck has some ways to reuse its free spells, which is pretty sweet. So Remand in this deck, yes, you can use it as sort of a counter on your opponent, but I think the main way you'd use it is to, on turn 3, for example, cast a Gitaxian Probe, maintain priority, remand the Gitaxian Probe, that's another spell, you draw a card, then you can cast the Gitaxian Probe again, that's spell number 3, and you just need 1 more free spell to turn on your Erayo. Snapcaster is the same way. On turn 3, you Gitaxian Probe, draw a card, Snapcaster Mage is spell 2, flashback the Gitaxian Probe, spell number 3, then you're just 1 spell away from flipping around your Erayo and kind of locking your opponent. And then we have kind of the backup win condition plans, and both of these cards work really well with the plan of casting a lot of really cheap, free, cantrippy type spells. So Monastery Mentor makes a bunch of 1/1 tokens, also has prowess, so they just really get out of control super fast. If you can cast a bunch of free spells after you already have a bunch of monk tokens, it's pretty easy to make them 3/3s or 4/4s or 5/5s and win the game. Myth Realize, you can play it on turn 1. It's also a 1 mana spell, so it is cheap with Erayo to flip it around, but as you cast these free spells, you're getting these lore counters on Myth Realize. Eventually, for just 1 mana, mana, you can turn it on, and it's like a 5/5 for one or a 6/6 for one that can keep beating down or block if need be. And then the last creature in the deck, we have Dark Confidant, which works well with the cheap stuff plan because you're flipping over these cards, generating card advantage, and because their converted mana costs are so low, or even zero in some cases, like Slaughter Pact, you are getting these spells that fuel your Erayo and give you some amount of benefit, but don't cost you life with Dark Confidant. In the mana base, we get a bunch of fetch lands, we get a bunch of shock lands, and then just some basic lands of 4 different colors, a little bit of green in the sideboard. Speaking of the sideboard, it is mostly hate cards, so Leyline of Sanctity helps against burn, locks out discard, Rest in Peace shuts down Dredge and other graveyard-based decks, Gaddock Teague is awesome against Wrath, kind of protects you from your opponent sweeping away all your monk tokens once you get your army build up. And then we have a bit more cheap removal, 1 more Slaughter Pact, a Path to Exile, and Twisted Image. Great answer to Spellskite, plus it cantrips for 1 mana, so in the worst case, you just kind of fire it off as a 1 mana cantrip. So that is Esper Erayo for Modern, and that's been our Instant Deck Tech for today. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will talk to you soon.